Our next guest is Rick Scott's longest-serving and most senior advisor. He designed the recount strategy. His name's Curt Anderson, founding partner of On Message and today's headliner. Sir, good morning to you, and thank you for being here with us today.
Hey, thank you for having me.
At what point were you most concerned?
Well, you know, I would say I don't think we were ever concerned that we were going to lose the recount because the votes were there. I would say the most concerning part was when in both Broward and Palm Beach, they kept changing the tallies and wouldn't tell anybody why they were doing it. And finally, we had to go to court to get them to enforce the law. That was probably the most unnerving part of it.
But a lot of that was early on. But you declared victory early on. And part of the strategy sometimes is to force your opponent to catch you, to play catch-up.
Well, we never. That's right. But the fact is there's never been an election in American politics with this big a margin that was overturned. So there wasn't a question about that. And the truth is, what the Democrats did was Bill Nelson basically shut his campaign down and went into hiding, and they turned the whole thing over to their lawyers that came down from D.C., and they put at least 9 federal lawsuits in trying to change Florida law after the election. So it was kind of an absurd strategy. But, you know, fortunately, we prevailed.
What was absurd was the deadlines that were missed, particularly in Broward County by 2 minutes. Brenda Snipes apparently is resigning over this whole thing. What a mess. They said they didn't know how to use the computer. I mean, you're responsible for hand counting hundreds of thousands of votes, but you don't know how to use the voting computer?
Well, they had used that computer 5 days earlier to submit the initial results in on time, and then mysteriously they didn't know how to afterwards. Now, you know, with regard to Brenda Snipes resigning, this is a dark day for the Democrats. I mean, the DNC should lower their flag to half-staff, because this is a blow to their chances of winning Florida in the presidential race in 2 years.
Oh, you believe that, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, you can decide if you think it's more incompetence or corruption or whatever, but it's mayhem, and it's just so terribly run that this was sort of part of the Democrat strategy, was just confusion and in Broward, and there's still 2,000 ballots that they admit are floating around somewhere.
There was a lot of politics, red tape, and BS, if you don't mind my French here, that Republicans had to cut through. And they had a secret weapon in the Florida recount. Her name was Jessica First Johnson. She's a 37-year-old general counsel to the National Republican Senatorial Committee. And she had to go down there and try to cut through all this mess. How essential was she to this recount process?
Jessica was crucial to the recount. We had a lot of firms engaged, firms that were veterans of Bush v. Gore. We had Jason Torchinsky, our campaign lawyer, who was great. But Jessica came down there and brought a lot of order to the madness, and she was indispensable. The one thing that I would tell you about this recount and about this election that people don't understand, this election and this recount was Rick Scott versus Chuck Schumer and the National Democrat Party. That's really what it was. Bill Nelson was only tangentially involved in this. This was all about 2020. Schumer and his group spent more than $50 million, the most they've ever spent trying to beat a Republican running for the U.S. Senate, and that's really who the participants in this election were.
Interesting. Here's the tweet from the president on screen. He says, "From day one, Rick Scott never wavered. He was a great governor and will be an even greater senator and representing the people of Florida. Congratulations to Rick on having waged such a courageous and successful campaign." I think your analysis there about 2020 is very interesting. Do you think that Broward ballot, the way it was constructed, cost Bill Nelson votes?
No, I don't. And in 06, there was about the same difference between the number of votes in the governor's race and the Senate race. That's just one of a whole bunch of red herrings that Mark Elias and the Democrats threw out there. And they have endless, every time you beat down one of their crazy theories, they come up with another one. And the truth about them is, they say, Bill Nelson and Mark Elias say they want every vote counted, and they do. They want the legal votes counted and the illegal votes. They want the votes that came in after the deadline, the ones that are from non-citizens, the ones that don't have signatures on them. That's their definition of having every vote counted.
Curt, you've been with the governor, now turned senator, since the very beginning in 2000. Now that this election is over, how is this going to help Floridians move forward?
Well, you know, the governor, the thing that people in Florida appreciate about the governor, and the reason he was able to win 4 races that everyone said he couldn't win, is he has this weird thing he does that doesn't happen in politics, and that is when he says he's going to do something, he does it. It's just really odd. And he really looks at things, you know, exterior to politics. And I'll give you one example. When he came in as governor, they would say, hey, oh, sir, you got to sign this and do this. And he'd say, why? And if the answer was, we're not sure why, we just have always done it that way, he's like, well, I'm not doing it. You know, come back. So he really believes that government needs to be reinvented, and that's kind of the approach he'll bring.
It's an interesting answer, and you know how Washington, D.C. can swallow politicians. But given Rick Scott's track record, you think about Mitt Romney coming into the Senate from Utah as well. What's the impact of these two men on that body, do you think, if there is one?
Yeah, you know, everybody in Washington, when you say, oh, there's a reformer coming up, they yawn and go back to their next cocktail party. And I understand that. But I would just tell you, Rick Scott means what he says. He brings a mind. He doesn't need the job. I think that's what's part of it, is he's had a tremendous amount of success in business. And his view is government does not need to be incompetent. The whole thing about, oh, it's good enough for government work, he just doesn't accept it. So he's got a lot of ideas on how to reform the system. He will push them hard. He's an easy to get along with person, a unique politician in that he's not the politician who comes in slapping backs and telling stories. He comes in listening. His view is that he's never learned anything while he was talking. So he's a very cerebral guy and somebody to really be taken seriously.
Well, we thank you for your time. Curt Anderson, congratulations on the victory.
Curt, thank you.